July 25th, 1944, near Saint-Lô, Normandy, France. 9:40 a.m. The sky is filled with engines, hundreds of them. A deep, rolling thunder that grows louder with every passing second. On the ground, American soldiers look up. Some smile, some nod, because they know what this means. Bombers, Allied bombers. A massive airstrike is about to begin. Men from the US First Army lie in their positions, pressed low against the earth. Helmets pulled tight, rifles close. They've been told to expect this, a heavy bombardment, one that will break German lines ahead of them. You can almost feel the anticipation, the tension, the belief that everything is about to change, because this attack is supposed to open the way forward. Operation Cobra. The long-awaited breakout from Normandy. The bombers appear overhead, wave after wave, flying in formation. Precise. Controlled. Then, the first bombs fall. Explosions ripple across the horizon. Dirt, smoke, and fire rise into the sky. The ground shakes beneath the soldiers. But something feels off. The explosions are closer than expected. A soldier lifts his head slightly. Too far back. Another explosion. Closer. Then another. And suddenly, the realization hits. They're short. The bombs are falling short. Panic spreads instantly. Take cover. Men press into the ground. Some try to run. Others freeze. The sky above is still full of bombers. And they're still releasing. Bombs begin landing directly among American positions. Explosions tear through friendly lines. A truck erupts into flames. A group of soldiers disappears in a blast of earth and fire. The air fills with debris, smoke, screams. What was supposed to be support has become destruction. Inside the chaos, officers try to signal. Smoke panels, markers, anything to show the bombers their correct position. But from the sky, everything looks the same. Dust, smoke, movement. Another wave approaches. And this time, there is no doubt. The bombs fall again. Closer. More direct. The ground shakes violently. Trees are torn apart. Men are thrown into the air. Entire sections of the line vanish. Within minutes, order collapses. Units lose cohesion. Communication breaks down. And above it all, the bombers keep coming. Because they don't know, they can't see the mistake clearly enough. From their altitude, this is just another target zone. Another grid. Another drop. But on the ground, it is something else entirely. It is confusion. It is chaos. It is friendly fire on a massive scale. A soldier crawls through the dirt, ears ringing, vision blurred. He tries to stand, falls. Around him, nothing is where it should be. Positions destroyed. Equipment shattered. Men missing. And the bombardment isn't over yet. Another formation approaches. The sky fills again, and the soldiers on the ground realize something terrifying. This isn't stopping. Not yet. Because somewhere between the maps, the timing, and the coordination, something went wrong. A single mistake. And it's happening in real time. Right above them, July 25th, 1944. Above Saint-Lô, Normandy. From the cockpit, the battlefield looks controlled. Orderly. Formations hold tight. Bombers fly in straight lines, engines steady, wings level. The lead aircraft maintains heading. The rest follow perfectly. Everything is happening exactly as planned. Below, the ground is barely visible. Covered in smoke. Dust. Explosions. To the bombardiers, the target zone is a blurred grid. Coordinates marked before takeoff. Lines drawn on a map. They don't see the panic. They don't hear the screams. They only see the signal to release. And so, They do. More bombs fall. Back on the ground, the situation is unraveling. Officers try to regain control. Shouting orders. Waving signals. Trying to reorient units that no longer exist in organized form. But communication is breaking down everywhere. Radio lines are cut. Field telephones destroyed. Messengers unable to move through the bombardment. What remains is confusion. And confusion spreads faster than fire. Some units believe the bombing is still targeting German positions ahead. They prepare to advance. Others realize the truth. They pull back. Take cover. Try to survive. The line fractures. And in that fracture, the mistake deepens, because the coordination between air and ground has failed. Completely. The original plan was precise. Bombers would strike ahead of American lines, clearing German defenses, creating a path forward. But something went wrong in execution. The alignment of the bombing run, the orientation of the approach, the marking of friendly positions, all slightly off. Individually, small errors. Together, catastrophic. A slight miscalculation in direction. A delay in signal correction. A misunderstanding of visual markers. And suddenly, the bombs are landing where they shouldn't. Inside one shattered command position, an officer grabs a radio handset. Trying to reach higher command. Trying to stop the bombing. Static. Broken signals. No response. Above, another wave of bombers begins its run. Perfect formation. Perfect timing. Completely unaware. The officer slams the handset down. Looks around. There is nothing left to coordinate. Because coordination requires structure. And structure is gone. Outside, the bombardment continues. A platoon attempts to move out of the impact zone. They don't make it far. A bomb lands nearby. The blast throws men off their feet. When the smoke clears, some don't get up. Others stumble forward, disoriented, trying to understand what just happened, trying to find direction in a battlefield that no longer has one. Minutes pass. But it feels longer, because every second brings more destruction, and no clear way to stop it. In the sky, the final wave approaches. The largest yet. Hundreds of bombers. Their engines fill the air with a constant roar. Below, the soldiers can only watch. Some try to run. Others drop to the ground. Some simply freeze. Because now, they know exactly what's coming, and there is nothing they can do. The bombs fall again, and this time, the impact is overwhelming. Explosions chain across the battlefield, one after another, relentless. The ground itself seems to break apart. Dust rises so thick it blocks out the sky. For a moment, everything disappears. And in that moment, the mistake reaches its peak. Because what was meant to break the enemy has broken something else instead. The very force it was meant to support. And somewhere in the chaos, the first realization begins to spread. This isn't just an error. This is a disaster. July 25th, 1944. Near Saint-Lô, Normandy. 10:07 a.m. The bombing stops. Not gradually. All at once. The sky empties. The engines fade. And for a brief moment, there is silence. Then the sound returns. Not from above. From the ground. Cries for help. Shouts for medics. Confused voices calling out names that no one answers. The smoke begins to settle slowly, revealing what's left behind. The landscape is unrecognizable. What had once been organized defensive lines is now a field of craters, burning vehicles, shattered equipment, and scattered bodies. A soldier stumbles forward through the haze, his helmet missing, face covered in dirt. He looks around. Turns slowly. Nothing makes sense. Landmarks are gone. Units are gone. The line is gone. He calls out. No response. Nearby, a medic drops to his knees beside a wounded man. No stretcher. No supplies. Just hands. Trying to stop bleeding that won't stop. Everywhere, the same scene repeats. Men searching. Calling. Dragging wounded through debris. Trying to rebuild something out of nothing. But there is no structure left. No clear command. No defined positions. Only fragments. And inside those fragments, the scale of the mistake begins to emerge. Entire platoons have been wiped out. Vehicles destroyed before they could even move. Artillery units neutralized before firing a single shot. Command posts erased. The coordination that had taken days to prepare, gone in less than an hour. You can almost feel the disbelief. Because this wasn't supposed to happen. This was supposed to be the moment of breakthrough. Instead, it has become something else entirely. A self-inflicted collapse. At one shattered command point, surviving officers gather what remains of their units. They try to count. But numbers don't match. Too many missing. Too many unaccounted for. Reports begin forming. Fragmented at first. Then clearer. Bombs fell short. Repeatedly. Across multiple waves. Not isolated. Not accidental. Systemic. A chain of errors that compounded with every passing minute. Some units had been hit once. Others, multiple times. Because the bombers kept coming. Because no one could stop them in time. Because the coordination had already broken before the first bomb fell. Minutes turn into an hour. And that hour changes everything. Not just the battlefield. The mindset. Confidence is shaken. Momentum is lost. What was meant to be a decisive push forward has become a moment of hesitation. Because before advancing, the survivors must regroup, reorganize, recover. And that takes time. Time the enemy could use. But something unexpected happens. Despite the devastation, movement begins again. Slow at first, then more organized. Because even in chaos, soldiers adapt. They reform lines, reassign roles, continue the mission. Not because everything is fixed, but because stopping completely is not an option. The objective remains. Break through, move forward, even after what just happened. But the cost is already written into the ground beneath them. And that cost will not be forgotten, because in less than 1 hour, single mistake has done what the enemy could not. It has shattered an entire formation. And yet, the battle is still not over. July 25th, 1944. St. Lo sector, Normandy. 11:32 a.m. The smoke has thinned. But the damage is clearer now. Across the shattered ground, officers walk slowly through what remains of their units. Not leading. Not commanding. Assessing. They step over craters. Past burned-out vehicles. Past men who will not move again. Clipboards in hand. Pencils shaking slightly as numbers are written down. Casualties. Missing. Wounded. The lists grow longer. And with each name, the reality deepens. This wasn't a small error. This was catastrophic. Entire sections of the line have been erased. Not weakened. Not pushed back. Gone. A communications officer stands beside what used to be a radio post. Only twisted metal remains. He tries to reconnect equipment. There is nothing left to connect. Nearby, a group of survivors gathers around a damaged vehicle. They speak quietly. Short sentences. Because no one has the energy for more. Because everyone is processing the same thing. How did this happen? The answer isn't simple. It wasn't one mistake. It was many. Small miscalculations. Misaligned bombing runs. Confused signals. Delayed corrections. Each one insignificant on its own. But combined, they created something unstoppable. A chain reaction. And once it began, there was no way to stop it in time. Further back, higher command begins receiving full reports. The tone changes immediately. This is no longer just battlefield confusion. This is a failure of coordination at scale. Questions begin forming. Why weren't the bombing markers seen? Why didn't the signals reach the bombers? Why did multiple waves repeat the same error? Each question leads to another, but the answers come too late. Because the damage is already done. Among the casualties is a senior officer, Lieutenant General Lesley J. McNair, killed by the bombardment. One of the highest-ranking American officers lost in the war, not to enemy fire, but to friendly bombs. His loss carries weight beyond the battlefield. It reinforces the scale of what just happened. This was not contained. This was not limited. This was widespread and deeply consequential. Yet even as the cost becomes clear, the battle continues. Because Operation Cobra cannot stop. Not now. Too much depends on it. The breakout must still happen. The German lines must still be broken. So despite the losses, despite the confusion, the advance resumes. Slowly at first. Then with growing coordination. Units reform. Artillery repositions. Infantry moves forward again. And this time, the bombing is gone. Only ground forces. Careful. Measured. Learning from what just happened. Because the mistake cannot be repeated. Not at this scale. Not again. By midday, the offensive begins to regain momentum. German defences ahead already weakened start to give way. Ironically, the bombardment, despite its error, has still disrupted enemy positions. But at a cost far greater than intended. A cost that cannot be justified. A cost that will be remembered. Because victory achieved through mistake feels different. Heavier. And as the battle pushes forward, the shadow of that hour remains. An invisible weight carried by every soldier who survived it. A reminder that in war, danger does not always come from the enemy. Sometimes, it comes from within. And when it does, the consequences are immediate, unforgiving. But the final impact of that mistake is still unfolding, because what happened in that hour will influence everything that comes next. July 26, 1944. Normandy front. Morning. The battlefield is quieter now. Not silent, but different. The explosions have moved farther away. The front line has shifted. Operation Cobra is working. American forces are finally breaking through German defences. Armour moves through gaps that didn't exist days before. Infantry advances across ground that had been impossible to cross. The momentum is real. The breakthrough that had been planned is happening. But behind that momentum, something lingers. The memory of what happened the day before. Because victory doesn't erase it. It only moves past it. On the ground, soldiers continue forward. But the way they move has changed. More cautious. More aware. Because they've seen what miscalculation can do. They've lived through it. Back at command, reports are finalized. Numbers confirmed. Casualties recorded. The scale becomes undeniable. Hundreds killed. Thousands affected. All within less than an hour. And not by enemy fire. By their own. Investigations begin almost immediately. Not out of blame, but necessity. Because something like this cannot happen again. Officers review flight paths, timing sequences, communication protocols. Every detail is examined. Where did the alignment fail? Why were the markers not seen? Why did the bombing continue after the first errors were noticed? Each answer reveals the same truth. War is not just fought with weapons. It is fought with coordination, precision, timing. And when those fail, the consequences are just as deadly as any enemy. Lessons begin forming quickly. Air-ground coordination procedures are revised, marker systems improved, communication channels reinforced. Because this mistake becomes a turning point in more ways than one, not just in the battle, but in how future operations are conducted. The cost becomes a lesson, a permanent one, and those lessons carry forward into the rest of the war, into every operation that follows, because the margin for error is now understood more clearly than ever. Back on the front line, the breakout continues. German forces begin retreating. Positions collapse. The path into France opens. What began in chaos is now turning into momentum. But that momentum is built on something complex. Not just success, but sacrifice and mistake, because sometimes progress comes forward, even when the path behind it is marked by error. And that creates a different kind of victory, one that is remembered not just for what was achieved, but for what it cost. The soldiers who move forward now carry both the success of the breakthrough and the memory of the hour that almost broke it. Because in war, not every tragedy stops the mission, but every tragedy leaves its mark. And some of those marks change how war is fought forever.